It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And it is a very exciting and special week here at Camp Dynasty because it is NFL Combine Week, baby.
Amen. We are looking forward to being in Indianapolis. We're looking forward to seeing all these guys with our own eyes and experiencing what we're about to preview here on this pod, which is RAS scores and drafting a team based on who's going to have the best RAS score. If you're here and you don't know what a RAS score is, it is RAS, stands for Relative Athleticism Score, and that's based off of all of your combine drills, put in averaged on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being, like Anthony Richardson of quarterbacks was a 10, and then 0 being like what you or I would do at the combine.
Right. Yeah, so that is what we are here to project and talk about. The combine obviously is one of the biggest moments of, hashtag draft season. We talk a lot about draft season starts with the Senior Bowl, really, but you can tell there is a different, it's at a different level when the NFL Combine rolls around, because I don't know about you, but I have now felt the tidal wave of people getting involved in draft content and putting out draft takes. All of your favorite dynasty or fantasy analysts have switched over to draft takes. They're all putting out their rankings. They're watching film right now. And we got DJ's latest mock. We got DJ's latest top 50. All the other top 50s, top 100s are coming out. Like, everybody is showing up right now to celebrate the NFL draft, which is coming in just over 2 months from right now. So, this is a big stop on that journey. It's always one of the highlights of the season. And we're going to be talking about who we think is going to come out of Indianapolis as a big winner in the context of RAS, like you said.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit. I know we talk about the Senior Bowl as the quote unquote official start of draft season. And while that's partially true, it feels like the national media kind of gets on board during the combine and then starts to roll, because then there's about a month and a half away until draft time once you get through the combine. That's when interviews are done and GMs maybe start leaking stuff a little bit to the media, and you get to mingle a little bit with everybody, go to the restaurants downtown, have soften some people up a little bit, maybe buy them a couple drinks and get a little bit of information. So everybody kind of congeals in Indianapolis, and you leave with maybe a little more information than you had when you went there.
I saw it aptly described once as the NFL's convention. It is the point in time, maybe the only point in time, in which all 32 teams are in one place, concentrated in one area, and that breeds what you're saying, conversation and rumors and things getting leaked out at tables at 11 p.m. over a couple of glasses of wine or something like that. So very exciting stuff. And with all of this, the hype trains are starting to leave the station as well. You are starting to now see some pretty insane stuff about some players that we've been talking about for a long time now, but maybe, some guys that are entering new territories than what we've previously thought about or talked about them in. So we will get to explore some of that on this episode as well.
What's the format look like?
Right. Yeah. We've switched this up every single time. We've done 2 combine previews. We've never done the same thing, and we're not going to do the same thing this year. Last year, we talked strictly, position by position. Who do we think the winner's going to be? Like, we're just kind of guessing. Like, what do we think? 40s and agility stuff. Who's going to stand out? And then a player that we're really interested to see how they perform, just in the context of maybe we're not sure how they're going to test. This year, it's draft season, and that means we're doing a draft because that's what you do in draft season. And what we are doing is trying to construct the best team made up of one player from each fantasy position group minus quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, D-line, linebacker, and DB, because it's an IDP program. One player per person per team who can draft the highest RAS average team. When we tally this up next week, go to MathBomb, pull the numbers, we will see whose team was the most athletic and therefore the biggest winners overall of Combine Week.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it a little bit this way instead of, because like 2 years ago we just did over-unders and we kind of guessed where they would land, and it feels like doing a draft and guessing based on RAS scores and having a little bit of healthy competition makes it feel a little more like draft season rather than just throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, it should be fun. We'll have 3 data points at least to take into year 4. Maybe we'll have a 4th different option next year. But so before we get into the draft, there are a few things I feel like we should talk about on the top. We're not going to talk about quarterbacks, so we'll talk a little bit about what we expect to see or some of the main storylines happening in the quarterback room department at Indy this year. But before we do that, I do feel it is essential to bring up something that was brought up to us in the wake of our 2024 Dynasty rookie redraft from last week. We drafted 12 players. We did a few honorable mentions at the end. In total, it equaled 15 players that we had talked about and covered. And among those players was not Tyrone Tracy. And somebody kind of came at us a little bit in the comments and said, what the hell? Where's Tyrone Tracy? Wasn't this guy like one of the best rookie running backs of the entire season outside of Bucky Irving? And you'd be correct in saying that. But Collin, is there a reason? Is there a good reason why Tyrone Tracy didn't make our cut last week?
I don't know if there's a good reason why he didn't make the cut. I think we just kind of forgot, if I'm going to be candid. But there are definitely pieces to that puzzle of like, well, why'd you leave? Like, how did you forget Tyrone Tracy? And I think it comes down to where he is and like his draft capital. It's the big, bugaboo with running backs, I would say, where you look at where they were drafted and what kind of team they're on. And that kind of builds the case of how confident can you be in backing that running back. So with Tyrone Tracy, he obviously was a late round running back and he's on a rebuilding team. And though he had a really nice rookie year, I don't know if you want to like put your eggs in the Tyrone Tracy basket of like, I'm going to trade a first round pick for him. Like, I just don't think that that's a realistic situation. So he wouldn't be in the first round for me anyway. Like that's not what we're saying. We forgot to put him on the first round. Like, he just forgot him as an honorable mention because like, yeah, you could trade, 205 for Tyrone Tracy. Like, that's not offensive, but I just think there's a little bit that goes into Tracy beyond, because like if the Giants in the second round in this running back class have, Omarion Hampton or Caleb Johnson or TreVeyon Henderson just sitting there, like I wouldn't knock them for taking them because all those guys I think are far and away better than Tracy. So while we don't hate Tyrone Tracy, it's just like he's not a first round redraft guy, and maybe he's around the top of the second round in the redraft.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, he should have came up in the honorable mentions, I think, over a player like Trey Benson. Obviously, he had a more productive season than Trey Benson. There are factors in play as to why Trey Benson had the season that he did. In fact, I don't even think it's ridiculous. Maybe I'm showing my, bias here. I don't think it's ridiculous that somebody would prefer Benson to Tracy even now. I
Right.
really don't think that is a ridiculous take. But regardless, the season that he had, 839 yards, 5 touchdowns, probably should have had his name in that conversation. The flip side of this is exactly what you're saying, which is that, okay, 839 yards, 5 touchdowns. His only competition was Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary was hurt for parts of the season. That's kind of how he got on the field. And during his, limited action in which he did have these flash moments, he also had 4 fumbles. And he also is now facing the test of, the Giants going into a draft class like this one, in which there are so many talented running backs. This is something that I don't think, is always fully grasped when you talk about a running back class like this. They have to go somewhere. So even if there's a team that has a respectable back, like an Isaiah Pacheco, a Tyrone Tracy, any number of these guys where, you're on varying levels of success there, but guys who have seen success in the league, you might have a back that has equal parts talent getting drafted to that spot because he was a great value pick in the 3rd round for the team. And if that player comes into the league and has the talent that we all see in them and they outperform the incumbent, there's a pretty reasonable chance that player's workload is going to get cut, even if they were a good running back. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, there's really only a handful of irreplaceable running backs in the NFL. So I think there is certainly, some caution to be exercised with Tracy at this point. I think you could even extend that conversation to a Bucky Irving. I won't, but I think you could do it.
Right.
I've seen some pretty insane takes about Bucky Irving. We made him a 1st-round pick in the redraft at 8th overall, I believe. I saw somebody come out and say Bucky's a top 5 dynasty running back today. And I think that is a little bit ridiculous. So we do get a little bit of ahead of our skis sometimes with these young backs when they flash. So let's just remember it goes both ways. One season, that goes for players that didn't show you what you wanted to see yet. And it also goes for guys that flashed a little bit, but we're not totally sure what they are quite yet.
Yep, that's exactly right. Just got to be patient in both directions. You can't look at Tyrone Tracy and be like, oh, I was wrong on him. I got to go scoop him up for, this guy's asking for 110. Like, I can get a starting running back. Yep. Let's bump the brakes a little bit.
Exactly. All right. With the controversy addressed.
Also, I don't think it was controversial. No, I don't think the guy was mad at us either. I think he was just bringing
milking it. It's clickbait, but
this guy said, "What about Tyrone Tracy?"
Let's talk about the combine. And like I said, before we get into our draft, let's talk quarterbacks a little bit. We were talking a little bit before we started today that this combine, maybe even this draft cycle in general, feels a little strange. And you had a astute opinion on that relating to the wide receivers, but also the quarterback class being a little bit weaker.
Yeah, this is a interesting year because in the wise words of Ben Solak, he once said, there will never again be a bad wide receiver class. And that was like 4 years ago, and he's pretty much been right. Now, this year, I'm not going to say it's a bad wide receiver class because there's a lot of, guys with a lot of tools, but I don't think that we have like 3 or 4 top level receivers like we've had year in, year out. You think back to last year, and you have like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze, and Ladd McConkey, and so on and so forth. And like years before that, whatever. This year, we have a couple prospects that are interesting, but also like we don't have those kind of guys. And then you look at the quarterback room, and it's like, okay, the quarterback class isn't that juicy either. And then Ashton Genty will not be attending the combine. So there's a lot of good running backs, but like the guy isn't going to be there. So if you're like a fantasy person and you're looking at this combine, you're like, oh, a lot of the, there's just not as much juice as I was hoping there was or there usually is. I think that's kind of why you're looking. It's like, okay, there's a lot of good running backs, but after that, what am I looking at? And the people that are hoping to get edges and linebackers and DBs, I think you're going to be looking in the right place at this combine. But for the skill player positions on offense, it's a little weird.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, IDP, that's a great point. If you are playing IDP, you should be definitely excited about this class. It's looking, very, very good across the board. Multiple, players at each position that seem like projectable high-end talents. On the offensive side, it is a little bit weird. And I think part of it is also the hangover effect of a class that was as stacked and as elite as 2024 was, and all of those guys, Rome and Malik and Marv, and even though Marv and Malik didn't even test at the combine, you still had Rome, and then you had all of these other players.
Savion Worthy broke the record.
Savion Worthy breaks the record. Brian Thomas Jr. blazes. AD Mitchell blazes. Like, you had really, really high-end players in droves last season in the wide receiver room. I think you're going to get a similar effect to that with the running back class this year. I do think the waters have almost become a little bit muddy because of how many names there are. It's actually kind of insane. And then everybody kind of has their own guy in that range. And so it's you're 20 names in, honestly, in a running back class like this, with guys that are like actually, people are banging the table for some of these guys. So that should be fun. But aside from all that, strictly looking at the quarterbacks before we get into the rest of it, I think this quarterback class, by the day, since we've done quarterback 2.0, which is now a long time ago, a lot has changed for me in the last, 2 months. I just feel like I get lower and lower on it by the day, because as I watch more guys, I start to think, well, if we're talking pure talent, if we're talking big board, like I'm stacking grades, like there's no way a player like Shedeur is better than this guy. So then all of a sudden Shedeur starts to really, go down the list. And Cam Ward, who is still my quarterback one, to a similar degree, but not nearly as much. I'm coming into the combine, and I don't know where you're sitting, but I'm coming into the week where Cam Ward has really sort of stood the test of time as I've combed through this class. And players like Shedeur and Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart and these sorts of names are really sort of becoming almost a distant conversation as quarterbacks. And in a draft class like this one, when that, could still mean these guys are going in the first round, but in terms of what I'm expecting to see from them, it's not a whole lot.
Yeah, so Shedeur is not participating in the combine. We heard about that. He's just going to do like the medicals and the interviews. He's not going to do any of the drills. So one of the two guys that are at the top of this, draft board with Ward and Sanders is not going to be participating. And then Dart has been like a surging name, especially with the Senior Bowl, which we talked about. And I don't know. I'm excited to see Cam Ward throw it around. That's kind of where I'm at with the quarterback class, because, Jalen Milroe is going to test well. We've been saying that this entire time, but my stock in Jalen Milroe, I'm selling it to whoever will buy it at this point. And so it's for me, Shedeur and Cam Ward are pretty close, and then it's like everybody else. It's not really even a conversation, honestly.
So there is one name that we have not talked about that is getting that is one of these hype trains that I spoke about earlier, and that is Louisville's Tyler Shug.
I think it's shoe, like
Shoe.
what you put on your foot.
God, I feel like I've heard like 4 different people say it 4 different ways.
Anyway, about him.
Yeah. Okay, so he was at the Senior Bowl. That's kind of where the conversations began. One of the things with Tyler is that I believe he's 25 or will be 25 as a rookie. So there's always that negative connotation, especially with quarterbacks, because I feel like it's just that position where you want the young, potential filled phenom player to come in. And then a guy like this, who's kind of, been around and he's already 25, like not a guy that is going to excite the fan base. But there are a lot of people, incredible people, that are coming out and saying things now like this is quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 in this draft class. So I think this moment here, the combine, will shed some light on how valid some of that is. That's going to be one of the stories from the week. Not only what are teams saying about the quarterbacks in general, but what are teams saying about this player? Because right now it feels like a name that maybe we do need to pay a bit more attention to than we have.
It's Tyler Shuck.
Shuck. Okay, I knew there was a weird consonant sound in there.
So, yeah. All right. I guess so. We'll keep an eye on him. Maybe he'll blow us away. Maybe he'll keep rising in conversations, but I don't know. I don't have a analytical take on Tyler Shuck. I'm just here for the ride.
I do wonder. It's a perfect storm, as they would say, for some player to rise. And we thought that player was Jackson Dart. There was a hype train, and now that hype train has been passed by a new hype train, because this is what we do when a position group is lacking in talent. We need to fill the void with names, these sleeper-esque names that emerge through the process. And I'm not saying, none of these players are not, good or worthy of the hype. I haven't watched Shuck yet, so I can't really speak to that. We've talked a bit about Jackson Dart. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a great prospect at this position. So, but we'll get to see a little bit more from these guys. It's always a bit of a weird one for quarterbacks at the combine because, you can only learn so much from throwing in spandex and quarterback testing. However, where quarterback testing could matter quite a bit is whatever the hell Jalen Milroe's about to do. Because I know you're saying you're selling your Milroe stock. We've been on quite a ride with this player. But one thing that we know he can do is blaze a combine or a 40-yard dash that is going to open up everybody's eyes for at least a second. Be like, wait, are we sure we're out on this guy yet?
Yeah, that's kind of, maybe I can wait till after the combine, then sell my stock because it'll beef it up a little bit. But yeah, we can expect a lot out of Milroe. We can expect him to, dominate all these drills because this is all he's good at. And you can see the arm on display when he chucks that 9 ball down the sideline, and everybody can ooh and ah like we did with Joe Milton last year. And it's like, oh my God, he could throw it 70 yards. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to mean anything. And I know that's kind of where we talked about what does the combine mean and how much stock should you put into like RAS score and testing, and how much does it affect your scouting, and like the Milroe 9.6 that he's going to get is not going to move him on my board at all.
All right. I think, are we good? Quarterbacks?
I think we're good. I think it's a good preamble.
Yeah. Let's get into the meat of this thing. We are making 6 picks each. We're not snaking, or are we snaking?
No, I don't think it makes sense to snake with 2.
Okay. So I'm going to flip the commemorative medallion, and it is tails. So you have the first overall selection. No, you can go any position group. There's a little bit of strategy here, perhaps, but who is the first pick in your combine RAS draft?
I was afraid this was going to happen. Okay, so who do I? So the thing is, we're obviously gonna. I'm buying time here. We're gonna go in and we're gonna look next week at the average RAS score across our entire team that we draft.
Right.
So I got to get a 10 here with the number 1 pick. And I think that's got to be my strategy. And a player that I think could get a 10 is Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter is going to have a 10 RAS. I'm taking him as my DB because he's testing with the DBs, not the wide receivers. So we are expecting a sub 4.4 40, right around that 4.4 mark. He obviously has elite short area quickness for like that shuttle drill. He is a leaper. We see that with the contested catches and high pointing balls. So you look at, all the things that they end up needing: 40 times, short shuttle, broad jump, vertical jump, 3-cone, all of those things. I think Travis Hunter can be a guy that can dominate those things. And I think he's also ultra competitive. You might even see him like in the wide receiver gauntlet thing, just because like he can't keep himself off the field. So a guy that is hyper competitive, that's going to come into this prepared, that is the number 1 prospect on a lot of teams' boards. I think he's here to kind of stake his claim as don't even think twice about it. I'm the guy.
Yeah, I think I was wondering what direction you would go. I think that's a good pick because, to draft one of the freakiest freaks that's going to be in Indianapolis this week, not a bad strategy. And I think for, like you said, Travis Hunter, this is, if he does do all of the testing, we're still early in the week. This thing has a way of sort of materializing over the course of the week. Big names all of a sudden aren't doing all the tests, or maybe they're just doing a portion. If Travis Hunter decides he wants to put on a show and does the full array of tests, then I think he's going to light the world on fire. And it's going to be hard for teams at the top of the draft, even at number 1, to maybe consider taking another player over him. I think the only other option, at least from kind of where it feels like we are today, would be Abdul Carter, who we will unfortunately not get to see test as he was just cleared from his shoulder injury. So he will be testing at his pro day. Hunter has a chance to snatch that spotlight for a little while with a show this week. So let's hope he does just that.
Mm-hmm.
Except I don't hope he does, because that means that it's
right. That'd be working against
me.
You. Right.
And with my first pick, I think I'm going to stick on the defensive side. And maybe this is no surprise, because I think there are so many talented names on that side this year, and guys that we expect to have those ridiculous testing numbers at 250 plus. And one of those players is Jihaad Campbell. Mm-hmm. And that is who I'm going to take here. Linebacker, Jihaad Campbell, a player that will come in around 250 pounds and probably, shock some people with his athletic traits. I think that's something that not only do you see that on film, that, lending to his versatility on this Alabama defense, as a player that's playing off the ball, but also playing as an edge rusher and has the athleticism to play both roles. He has the sideline to sideline fluidity needed for off ball, and he's got the, explosiveness and the twitchiness to play off the edge. I think he is, maybe the embodiment of the hype train player right now. And I think a lot of the reason why Jihaad Campbell's name has kind of blown up over the last couple weeks is because people are anticipating what they're going to see with his testing. Like, I think a lot of people really like the film, us included. And I think a lot of people now, as we approach the combine, they put out that last top 50, and all of a sudden Jihaad Campbell's like top 15. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that coming out of Indy, that's probably where he's going to end up, given how he's going to test. So I will make him my first pick.
Yeah, that's also a good pick. I was thinking about going there, and now I'm like kind of realizing that I don't have to take linebacker now till the end. So now, and you don't have to take DB. So maybe flawed process. I don't know. A 2-person draft is always a little bit difficult, but
whatever. We're still going to talk about 12 players either way.
All right. So we got 2 defensive players off the board first, which is interesting. I'm going to go to running back here, and this is the cream of the crop for this class, like I mentioned. And I'm going to take TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson, I think, has the best short area quickness of any running back in this class. I think that matters more than anything with the combine testing, because you look at what you're graded on for relative athletic score, and it's the shuttle and 3-cone are very important. And then your 40-yard dash is obviously important. TreVeyon's really fast. He's probably going to be around that 4.4 mark too, maybe sub 4.4. But you have that 10-yard split and 20-yard split that are also baked into that you get scored on. And then, height, weight, bench, vertical, broad jump. So all of that, I think TreVeyon is exceptional at because of that bursty athleticism that he has. And so I think he can be up in that, 9.5 or higher range for the running backs. And I think, all of the other running backs are also very good. But I think he has a little more of the explosion, the acceleration than any of the other guys.
Yeah. I mean, obviously TreVeyon is another one of the hottest names maybe in the process right now. Seen his name even popping up in the late first round of some mock drafts. I have seen that. That has a lot to do with how he changes the game with his speed. And that is something, for 2 years that we've seen from TreVeyon, is that outside run game where when he gets into space and can turn up field, there's almost nobody that can catch him at that point. Mm-hmm. So I do, obviously I expect the 40 to be very fast. I do think it can be sub 4.4. I actually expect it to be sub 4.4. The question I have with TreVeyon, and not a question as though like in the sense that I'm worried about it, but I'm legitimately wondering how his agility numbers are going to be. Mm-hmm. Because he is a player that, and at least what I thought, was a little bit more like straight line and a little bit less, quick feet phone booth sort of runner. You see the explosive jump cuts. That is his signature move, exploding laterally and accelerating and using the speed. I'm wondering, like, 3-cone, like, what is that going to look like for TreVeyon? So he's going to test out of this world. And that's just one area where if he puts up a huge number there and really lights this thing up in full green, then it's all systems go.
All right.
Okay, well that's interesting because I thought I was going to have I still do kind of, but running back was really a tough one for me. So I'm going to now I get to save that. I get to think about that one a little bit. I think that I am going to jump to.
It's tough.
The defensive line pool is so big,
yeah,
that I feel like I'm gonna wait on that. Wide receiver, There's a couple names I'm pretty comfortable with there. I'm going to go tight end here.
I was afraid of this because I was debating going running back or tight end with my last pick, and now I think you're going to take my guy.
You know I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Elijah Arroyo.
Yep.
Because the Senior Bowl kick-started another, very positive process for a player here in Arroyo who, had good film at Miami. Obviously, the athleticism is showing up on his film. I think he came to Mobile and just dominated, and anybody who hadn't familiarized themselves with Arroyo's game became very familiar. He kind of stole the show a little bit, and that's going to carry straight into this week because he is going to run a shocking 40-yard dash at 250 pounds. I'm certain of it. And I think the rest of it's going to look just as good. So I'm expecting, we've seen some tight ends put up a 10 RAS the last few years. I think he might have a chance at it.
Yeah, he definitely does. This is who I should have taken with my last pick because he is the athlete of the bunch with the tight ends. I think maybe we had concerns about the size, like we've talked about many times, but turns out that that's unfounded because he was plenty big enough and he measured in at the Senior Bowl. So he has the size that won't knock him, and then he has the speed that'll juice him up to enough. And you look at tight ends of years past and Tucker Kraft, who didn't look exceptional at he looked good at the combine, but it wasn't blow you away, and he was a 9.67. So that's how you get to Elijah Arroyo 10 out of 10 RAS. I think it's a pretty clear path to get there.
Okay. So there are only two position groups left that have not been picked at: wide receiver and defensive line. So which direction will you go?
I'm going to go wide receiver. I'm going to go Savion Williams from TCU. So 6'5", 225. That's in the green. We're looking at a guy who was last offseason. This is from the Freaks list. Shout out to Bruce Feldman. Last offseason, 10.6 broad jump, 40-inch vertical, bench press 355, and has run 22.5 miles per hour. So this is a guy that has done it in the past and has these testing numbers kind of certified already. So maybe if he can pull that off in the combine and he can, get the start up to the 22.5 miles per hour where he can turn that into a real 40-yard dash. The only concern I would have is with that 3-cone short shuttle, but you can always opt out of those if your RAS is already looking good and you're I'm actually not going to do those. So Savion Williams got the size and the athleticism.
Yeah, Williams was a player that we talked about on the Senior Bowl preview show, and he ultimately did not participate in the Senior Bowl week. So this will be our first opportunity to see him in the, draft process. A player that I see you, Savion Hive. I know you're out there because players that are, like you said, 6'5" and 225 and can move like him, that are almost playing running back at the wide receiver position, consistently just getting handoffs over the second half of the season and turning those into big plays. Incredibly eye-catching stuff. I think there are the lingering questions about his ability as a wide receiver, but this event is specifically designed for a player like this to sort of, cover up a bit of that criticism and just say, hey, look at what I did at this size. Look at how green my RAS score is. And so I think, he's going to do just that.
Okay, so I'm hearing news that Elijah Arroyo will not be at the combine as of 3 hours ago.
Of course.
Yeah. So the one guy we both wanted at tight end, not going to be there. So if you want to redo your last pick, I think that's fair.
Okay. I will stick with tight end
okay.
to make it fair, taking the first tight end off the board. And I will switch my pick to Colston Loveland.
Okay.
So again, it wouldn't shock me if a player like Loveland just sort of like dipped at some point this week, because I think he has earned the accolades that he already has in terms of being talked about as a, potential top 15 talent in this draft class. However, I think this is a great opportunity for him, with all of the folks that are getting hyped up on Tyler Warren, for him to come in and be like, all right, guys, like, I get it, but I'm maybe just as good. And maybe you agree with that. Maybe you don't. I'm on record of saying Tyler Warren is the second best offensive player in this draft class behind Ashton Genty, but I have Colston Loveland like not far behind that. Like Colston Loveland right now, like skill position wise, my top 3 grades are Ashton Genty, Tyler Warren, and Colston Loveland. I don't have a wide receiver until number 4 with Tet McMillan. So that is how much belief I have in Loveland. And a lot of it comes down to what you are getting athletically in this body type at 245 pounds, a player that is just smooth as silk and can easily, stretch the field. So I'm expecting to see, some of that show up this week.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me in terms of RAS score, because that's what we're looking at here, is the size, because I think he's a little light, and like that is going to play into it. But at this point, like a guy like Loveland is going to put up good numbers. He's going to put up big numbers at the combine. So yeah, can't blame you there. I think that's a good consolation prize after Arroyo falls through.
Okay, so
now you're on to your next.
I'm up
pick.
again.
Yep.
And you just took.
I just took Savion Williams.
Savion Williams. So the last position group then is D-line.
Yep.
And this is easily the deepest. There are no shortage of names, even with Abdul Carter not being involved. I think there's 8 guys that you could comfortably take here and feel good about it. There's 2 names that I have. One of them, I like the player more, but I'm going to take the other guy because I think he is the embodiment of, light this event on fire. And that is Mykel Williams from Georgia. So a player here we talked just briefly about, I think, as a more, developmental sort of edge, just because he wasn't playing primarily off the edge for Georgia. He was playing more in that, 3-3-5, playing as that defensive end in a 3-man front. So projecting him to go outside in the NFL, there's a little bit of that, are we talking about a Trayvon Walker situation here, where this is a player that doesn't have necessarily the film to back it up, but could be a top 10 or top 5 even sort of pick in this class. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's going to show up this week at 265 pounds, I believe 6'5", 265, and he is going to be one of the most athletic players in this position group, period. So this is really like all of the Mykel Williams believers, like this, it all comes down to this right here when you get to see those numbers and be like, how can you pass on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you look at Mykel Williams, and we talked about him as, what is he, an edge? Is he a linebacker? That's just a testament to the freakish athleticism that this player has. You see Georgia guys at the top of this list year in and year out. That's because of the type of athletes that they recruit. and churn out into NFL prospects. And Mykel Williams is another one. There's another person that we're considering that I am not going to end up taking, Jalen Walker, that also is on this list. And I think we decided that he was a linebacker.
He should be an edge.
You're right. So we decided that he's an edge. And so it's like they have these two guys, again, with every year they got these players that are going to dominate
athletes.
Yeah, that are going to dominate the front line, and like you take them early and you hope you can develop them into dominant pass rushers, and then you get a guy like TreVeyon Walker that was basically irrelevant for his first 2 years, and now he's a double-digit sack guy in his third year. You give him some time to develop on that athletic freakish frame, and you turn him into a player potentially that could be a Pro Bowler. Does that mean anything? A Pro Bowler?
No.
Yeah, no.
Pro Bowl. Right. If I hear Pro Bowl being referenced as an accolade, all I think about is Mitch Trubisky, and then I'm like, it doesn't matter at all.
Tyler Huntley, Mac Jones.
That's so stupid. The NFL really, what the NHL did with their all-star format, I think every other sports league can take a page out of that book. Like, let's just get rid of it. I don't need to see an all-star game. Make some sort of spectacle.
What did hockey do? People don't watch hockey.
It was the Four Nations event. Four countries competing against one another in a tournament. There was actual drama there. It was, it was feisty. Canada, USA was very,
I mean, that has other.
There were other implications, but that's what made it so good. So
right.
Can we figure out a way to do this across other leagues? I'm not sure what the football equivalent of that would be, but I can't do
play
Pro
France in football. That's what I want to see.
All right, so we are now at the point in which we are picking the positions that are uncontested at this point.
Yep.
But that does not lessen the intrigue because there are still very talented players. Some could even argue maybe you even had this next player that you're going to take even higher than the one that was taken in front of you. So there's no shortage of drama remaining, and you are up next.
I am up next. I'm going to just stay with edge, keep this conversation flowing. I'm going to go Mike Green. Yep. This is a guy that we have been championing throughout this pre-draft process, through the rankings 2.0 process. We talked about him at length on the IDP episode. Mike Green out of Marshall. He is one of the most explosive players that's going to be at this combine. And like I said with TreVeyon Henderson, explosiveness is what gets you the win at the combine. His get off of the line of scrimmage is one of the best. He's like converts the speed to power so well, and like you don't have to in this. You just keep the speed and burn it off, and that's what I'm expecting out of Mike Green. I think that first 10 is going to be really impressive for his 40-yard dash. I think the 3-cone and the short shuttle, those are his bread and butter for what he can do. The vertical and the broad jump, I'm not sure, but I think he's also going to, get quite a few reps on the bench. And then, they talked to a coach of his, and they were like, well, what do we got with Mike Green? Like, is this a real player? This is before this past season. He's like, yeah, he talked to me and asked me what he needs to do to get the NFL. And I told him, you need to put on weight. And he's like, all right. And so he took money out of his own pocket, hired a personal dietitian to beef himself up so he could be at a healthy playing weight and put on some weight. So I think he's going to check all the boxes.
Yeah, another player here that is on a supersonic hype train, starting with Senior Bowl week. We talked about him in IDP 2.0 as sort of a I'm a little bit afraid here, but Mike Green's my number 3 D lineman in the class. I get it. It's Marshall. And since we did that, it was like everything has just led to this player being a top 20 pick. And that's probably the floor for Mike Green. I mean, you could reasonably, see him going top 10 potentially, especially if the week goes the way that you and I think it's going to go for him in terms of his testing. So to see what we did, not only as the most productive edge rusher in college football this year, being one of, if not the most dominant players at the Senior Bowl period, to now having, what we expect to be one of the best weeks of testing for D linemen. Mike Green, man, buy the stock while you can, because we're still going up.
That's right.
All right. So now I will transition, I think, to I don't know if I'm ready to make my running back pick yet. I still have 2 names that I'm torn between. So I will go to wide receiver.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people are expecting Arian Smith to potentially have the fastest 40 at the entire combine, but I'm not going to take him. And I'm not going to take him because I want to take a better football player.
I respect that.
I'm going to take Isaiah Bond.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of directions here. Like Jalen Noel has been kind of one of my guys. I could have taken him. The reason I want to go with Bond here is because I think not only can he do the thing, like give me a big green number to help my team here, but I think this event is so critical for Bond, whose name has just completely fallen off the map. I mean, nobody is talking about Isaiah Bond at this point in the process. And I'm not going to say that they're wrong for doing that. Like, I still believe and I still have a decent grade on this player at this point. He is my wide receiver 9, I believe. Yeah, wide receiver 9 at this point. And I still have like a early third, sort of like late second, early third sort of grade on him. So like, I still believe in this talent, the flashes that you saw, but most importantly, the athleticism and the speed, which didn't always translate to production at Texas. And that has been a common thread for athletes in this program. And you could even lump Matthew Golden, who's, very athletic, but I don't think nearly as athletic as Isaiah Bond.
Kind of took Isaiah Bond's lunch.
He did.
This draft process.
He really did. And he's become all the rave. And now Bond is like the forgotten name. But I think we're gonna remember how different his speed is this week, because it is. I mean, the acceleration and the speed, really, it was one of the most eye-popping things, even going all the way back to the summer with this wide receiver group. And it still showed up from this year at Texas, even though the numbers weren't there. You still saw the player that maybe he's not a complete wide receiver today, but man, he has got some real game-changing athleticism and game-changing speed with the building blocks in place. He's not a complete project. So I'm looking for Bond to sort of reclaim some of that lost, we're going to start talking about Isaiah Bond again after this.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Bond was the other wide receiver I was considering next to Savion Williams, because Bond's going to have the 40 time. I think when you get to the end of the week, you're in your NFL app and you're like, who did what, sort by 40 time. Isaiah Bond's going to be near the top of the list, if not at the top of that list, because that's the type of player he is. The reason I stayed away from him is just solely because of the size. He's going to come in thin. He's going to come in a little shorter. And so those are the type of guys that dominate the 40 and dominate the shuttle and dominate the 3-cone. And, we'll see about the 40 and the broad jump. So I definitely think that people will have their, the eye-opening experience again with Bond and be like, oh man, why aren't we giving this guy a little more attention? Maybe this is the next quote fast receiver that's in the NFL.
All right. So you have a couple of position groups left.
I do. I have linebacker, I have tight end, and I think I have linebacker and tight end left.
Yep.
I'll save tight end for last. But who do I want to go with? There's a fair amount of linebackers I think that we have to choose from in this, and that's what makes it a little bit difficult. But I'm gonna go with Kobe King out of Penn State. So he's not a name that we've talked about before, but he is a downhill linebacker that played behind and off of Abdul Carter. He's the brother of Kalen King, formerly of Penn State, now a Green Bay Packer. He's 6'1", 245, kind of a big linebacker, you could say, because that's where we're at now, about 10 pounds bigger than average in the NFL. So we'll see. I think that he won't run super fast, but I think he can dominate in all the other drills because of the athleticism that he has, the explosion that he has. He has this downhill mentality. So maybe, these Penn State guys usually test pretty well. So maybe he will turn in a good 40, but I think it's outside of that, the other drills where he'll look pretty good.
Interesting. I have no notes. I've not watched the player. So if he pops like you say he's going to, then I guess I got to watch him.
All right.
All right. I think no, I'm going to save running back for last.
Yeah.
We're going to go to DBs. And I think it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
I didn't get Travis Hunter like I wanted, but I am still getting Nick Emmanwori.
Yep.
I mean, I know I've said this a lot, but it's like I said at the beginning, this is the time of year. Hype trains, Emmanwori's name, it feels like when we talked about IDP, when we did 2.0 and we talked about DBs, Emmanwori was a player that I had watched based off of some, fair feedback, like second round sort of, maybe third round sort of name, behind a guy like Malachi Starks at safety even. But the first thing that pops when you watch Emmanwori is the athleticism. And that is something that I think, again, has propelled him up people's boards even now. We anticipate these combine bumps now. And I think this is one of them because at his size, 6'2", 227, I believe is what he's listed at. He is a freak, man. I mean, literally a freak. He's on the Feldman's freak list, but just eye-popping stuff at this size, playing as a safety when you put on the film. And I think obviously that will translate this week, and with RAS, with the size numbers, I mean, it's going to be pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, this is the only other, I think, DB that I was considering outside of Travis Hunter. He was number 11 on the Freaks list, and that came out before the season. That's with a 11.4 broad jump, which is unbelievable.
Projected to maybe be the best amongst all players at the combine this year.
Right, and then a 42-inch vertical, which is insanity. 24 reps of 225, which, I mean, for a DB, unreal. And then, on top of that is in first team All-American. So this is a really good player that is going to go real high in the NFL draft and should definitely have all eyes on him for the combine.
Yeah, it feels good to have safeties.
Yeah, it does.
To have a Malachi Starks level guy and then like an Emmanwori athletic size, speed specimen kind of guy there with some names behind him to boot. It's nice.
I agree. And I have tight end.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take Harold Fannin.
Yeah.
Because I think we should talk about him, but also like he's a good athlete. So it's not I think he'll still end up good in the RAS. I think we're looking at a player that we had lower than consensus potentially in our tight end rankings 2.0.
It's
But
fucking crazy to say that because what
yeah,
did we have him? Tight end 3?
3 and 4 is where we had him. Like pretty good. So Fannin, not a bad player. I'll say that. And I think he's going to test very well. I think he'll have a good 40. This is a player that is in a smaller frame at 6'3", probably around 240. We'll get the official number at the combine, but unbelievable production at Bowling Green. And with the smaller size, that's going to knock him a little bit in that like height weight category that I've been bringing up, but he's really fast. So like we talk about him as like a running back with the ball in his hand, and that's why they used him the way they did on screens, on crossers. Just get the ball in Harold Fannin's hands, whatever way we can, and let him do him. And I think that's going to translate to the things he can do. Now, a question we had is to change the direction against man coverage, and that's going to pop out in the shuttles and the cones and whatever. But I think he'll be fine. I think the vert will be good. I think the broad will be good. I think the 40 should be solid. So we'll see what kind of day he turns out. I think he has the athleticism to make a good day. I think he's probably been prepping for this for a while. I think he kind of needs as much behind him as possible with the small school kind of knock on him from the NFL's eyes. So this should help a little bit.
People forget that we were the champions of Harold Fannin throughout the entirety of the season. And then we get to the draft process. So you guys are too low on Harold Fannin.
Mm-hmm.
Been talking about Harold Fannin for 8 months.
Right.
Get off my back.
Yeah. This is your first day thinking about Harold Fannin, buddy. Like, let's reality check.
But in all seriousness, he would have fit probably into my most interested to see category if we were doing this like last year, just because I think I am expecting him to test well. There is that weird question about how he runs and his change of direction and the stiffness in his lower body. Will that ultimately affect some of his testing numbers or not? I could see it going either way. So, but yeah, this is going to be a huge week for him, of course, because there are a lot of fans, by the way. I know we've been talking about him through the season. A lot of people at this point who are getting into the film are starting to see. I mean, I'm sure you've seen your favorite, Twitter follows, because I've seen them. They're watching this Bowling Green guy that had 1,400 yards, and they're like, wait a minute, what? This guy's insane. How are we not talking about this guy? And it's like, well, I mean, we are, but it's just when you're behind players like Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, it becomes a little difficult. And there's plenty of names in this range. Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor. These are all great tight end prospects. This is an incredible tight end class. And I'm hoping Fannin, continues to distinguish himself with his testing this week.
Yeah, I hope that he has a good week, because this is the kind of player that I think people are going to be either all in on or all out on. Yep. I think finding somewhere in the middle is hard to do in this kind of space, in the fantasy space, in the dynasty space. It's like you're either going to draft him 101 and he's going to be your guy, or he's off my board. So I think being a little bit in the middle is fine, but him testing well will make a few more people believers.
I believe we have reached the end of the line. I am making the last pick.
Yep.
And I still haven't decided which direction I want to go at running back. TreVeyon was on my list. he was my alternate pick. I do
Okay.
have two names that I like. They're all sort of in the same bucket. It's Dylan Sampson and Bhayshul Tuten. Those
Okay.
are the two names that I'm wavering between. And I'm kind of tempted to go Tuten here. And I think I'm just going to do it.
Okay.
Bhayshul Tuten. We talked about Tuten, felt all the way back in summer. Feldman's Freaks was one of the only running backs on that list. This is a Feldman's Freak. He had another good season. He's had 3 of those at Virginia Tech. This season ended with 1,150 yards and 15 touchdowns, added 188 yards receiving on 23 catches. Tuten's a good player. I mean, he looked good at the Senior Bowl. I went back and watched some more film on him. He's good.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is this running back class is insane. And so he ends up being like RB 15. Like, yep. I mean, that's, and I think he's a good player. He would have been like flirting with the top 5 last year for me, I believe, with the grade that I have on him right now. So that's just what we're talking about here. And a big reason for, for why this player has seen so much success and why this was another great season is that he is an ultra athlete at this position. The speed is effortless. This is going to be your, token Shanahanian wide zone runner. I mean, it's becoming easier and easier to identify these guys. Like Jalen Wright last year was like, man, he's a perfect fit in like the Dolphins offense. And who takes him? The Dolphins. It's like these guys that have this lateral, the outside zone where they just get moving laterally, wait for that lane to open up and hit it at 100 miles an hour and finish those runs. Tuten falls into that category. He gives you a little bit more than that as well. There's a little bit of change of direction. There's a little bit of power. Not all of it is super consistent, but I would expect here in Indianapolis for him to be one of the best testing running backs at the event. And I know, because I've seen it, that there is maybe some noise about this player being like a higher draft pick than what's being advertised right now or where I have him graded. And I think that's just a product of people love ultra athletic running backs. People loved Jalen Wright last year because of this exact reason. I think Tuten is one of those guys that fits into the category. And for our purposes here in a RAS draft, he's going to be my pick.
Yeah, this was my other running back in case I didn't get TreVeyon. Tuten, 5'11", 208, 210, whatever. Was clocked at a 4.32, which I'm not sure, running downhill at his own practice facility with the wind at his back. I don't know, but we'll see what that looks like. Probably closer to 4.4. But he has been also timed at 23.15 miles per hour, which is flying. And then, the bench is great. The vertical is 39 inches. So we have some of an idea of what Bhayshul Tuten is going to look like. Is the short area stuff going to look great? To be determined. And I think it will, because I think he has that kind of burst, that kind of speed. But yeah, I'm excited to see, because I agree. This is the speed running back that's going to be plugged into some, the Vikings, and he's going to be good.
4.32. I'm not saying that's impossible.
He's not running a 4.32.
I think he's running at least a 4.35. Trey Benson ran a 4.39.
Yeah, okay, that's 300. You said 4.3. Oh, I was thinking of 4.23. I was like, there's no way he's running a 4.23.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah, no, 4.32. Yeah.
It's possible, but 4.35 seems very reasonable.
If he's right around 4.4, I'll be happy.
Because I think Garendo ran a 4.33. And I would put these two players in a similar ballpark.
Yeah, and people were shocked by Garendo's time. And they're like, who is this guy? Because he had the size and then come away with the speed. Yeah, the 4.33.
All right. Well, that's our draft. And now we will wait to find out who is the king of RAS here at Camp Dynasty. But most importantly, we're all winners because you and I will be in Indianapolis on Friday watching, hopefully, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland and the tight ends performing on Friday night at Lucas Oil Stadium and having a great weekend watching the rest of them. So hell of a time to be, here in draft season. This is really where it's, it's all starting to pick up now. Like I said, everybody's getting involved. Soak it in, enjoy it, read every mock draft you see, even if it sort of makes your stomach turn after the 8th one, because it only comes around one time per year.
Oh, it's kind of sad to think about it that way. It's like Christmas a little bit, we're 2 months away, and where the stockings are being hung by the fire with care, and Matt Miller and Daniel Jeremiah are dropping little treats in them every once in a while.
And you're going to get sick of those Christmas songs, but then when Christmas is over, you're like, I kind of miss those Christmas songs.
Where's Mariah Carey?
Oh, man. All right. Well, if you enjoyed our preview of the 2025 NFL Combine, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty, TikTok at camp.dynasty. If you are on the YouTube feed, be sure to hit subscribe and like before you leave. I know that liking videos, I'm one of the people that's like, I don't want to like videos that are just like, somebody's telling me to like it. Like my liked videos folder or playlist is like kind of sacred. I get it. You don't have to like it if you don't want to.
All right. Likes are free. Just fucking like the video. Who cares?
I see you. If you're like me, something. I see you. So, but at least subscribe. That's the least you can do if you're here.
So your subscribe feed is less sacred to you than your liked feed?
Yeah, because the subscribed feed is like, this is where all of the channels are that I like to watch. The liked one is like, if I go in there, I want it to be like all of my favorite videos of all time.
Okay.
And if if you liked this preview of the Combine, but it was like, it was fine. Like I liked it, but it wasn't like the best. I see why you wouldn't want to put it in your likes. I get it.
I think you should like it either way.
We appreciate it if you do. And if you're on the pod feed, follow, share, rate,
5 stars.
review. Yeah, all of those. That's all. See, nothing weird there. You can do all that. That's all free. That's not going to mess up your juju. So, but all right. Well, next week we will revisit this, see who won, but more importantly than that, we will break down everything that happened in the context of 2025 Dynasty rookies at the NFL Combine with firsthand experience. So
maybe there'll be a video or two that pops up on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or wherever. Who knows?
Yep. Who knows?
See if we're
guess you got to subscribe to find out.
There you go. Leave a like.
Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.